Disney classics, original programs, National Geographic, Marvel TV shows and movies, Star Wars. Now, these are just some of the choices you'll get on Disney Plus. And this is the podcast for Disney Plus fans. Join Scott Murray, Regina Davis, and Nathan Chick as they bring you breaking news, programming recaps, in-depth discussions, and insightful interviews that will take your Disney Plus fandom to new levels. Welcome to the Disney Plus Streamcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Disney Plus Streamcast. I'm Scott Murray, and I am here with Regina Davis.
Hey, guys.
And in a few minutes, we're going to be talking to Matt Moore from Book Noob about the What If comics, since we are getting a What If animated series on Disney Plus. But first, we have to talk news, and that means it's time for News with Nathan.
Hello, Scott. Hello, Regina. How are you both doing?
So good.
Good.
Fantastic. It's football season. Are you excited?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I'm out.
I'm not. But, I was just playing along. It's cool. I know you're a fan. It's
one out of three ain't bad then.
Yeah, this is a Disney Plus podcast. We're not here for the football. We're here for the dorky news. We're here for all the fun and games that's to do with Marvel and Star Wars and Disney. And honestly, guys, there's not a lot ever since D23. It's been a bit quiet.
Yeah.
But that's all right. We'll have a chat about a couple of bits that are, I think, pertinent. Okay. One is just a bit of a speculation, perhaps. And the other one, well, it's something that we didn't cover last time because we were so jazzed about other news. On a whim, I was going through Mark Hamill's Twitter the other day. I don't like Twitter much. I'm not one for social media. Shouldn't say that in the wrong sort of setting for that, really. But in any case, going through there, and he was talking about his new bust that he has at Galaxy's Edge. And he was saying, don't think it looks much like me. There's a gold bust of, or bronze bust of Luke Skywalker there. And it's Beardo Luke, it's old Luke. And he was saying, who do you think it looks like? He thinks it looks like Oliver Reed, and it does. Other suggestions were Orson Welles, the Gorton's Fisherman, Peter Dinklage, Rip Torn. Anyway, he's got a point, but, I dare say the guy who sculpted that did a better job than I could possibly do with it. But that encouraged me to go back through his Twitter and just have a look and see what was out there. He looks like a man who likes to engage with his fans. He looks like a man who he's very active in the Geekyverse, as it is, having a finger in lots of those different pies.
He also likes to mess with people's heads that will take something and run with it and go bananas.
Right. And, and it's about that I guess I'm talking about today. I'm going to take you back to, I want to say it was March 27th, where someone asked him, hey, is this leaked movie poster from episode 9 legit? And he was like, no, work of a fan. And someone else said, no, it looks pretty legit to me because we have inside kind of a line on this. And he was like, are you kidding? 3PO with a crossbow? You're kidding me. Not a chance. Well, anyway, I looked at that poster, and wouldn't you know, at the bottom of the poster is a phalanx, a legion even, of red Sith troopers. Sith troopers, those weren't leaked that early. So how much of the rest of it is legit? And sure enough, on there is C-3PO with a bowcaster. And again, you might not think much of it, except in that last sizzly trailer-y thing that came out not so long ago, there's that shot in there with 3PO with the red eyes looking all moody and stuff. So, do we think, straw poll, I don't know, talk amongst yourselves, do we think that C-3PO is going to go ham with a crossbow on episode 9? I'm for it. I'm there for it. If that's the case, I'd love to see him do that.
If he does, you can just go ahead and bury me because I will be the happiest person in the entire world. That would be incredible. And I don't know who to believe now that Scott mentioned he likes to mess with people's heads. The truth is out there. I just don't know what it is. And here comes Scott to stomp on my nose. Here we go.
Here's the simplest way I can put this. And by the way, it doesn't go for just this. It goes for everything. Okay? I don't care.
See?
I mean, there is nothing that makes me roll my eyes more today than speculation. And part of it is because on top of speculation comes clickbait crap that somehow gets spread all over the internet, and it doesn't even have to be sourced, and people are running around asking if this is real and if this is true. And some of the stuff I see out there that people think could happen, I don't know what drugs they're doing, but they need to get off of them. I don't understand it. If it's not coming from Variety, if it's not coming from Entertainment Weekly or StarWars.com or something that has some credibility, it means absolutely nothing. And on top of that, I'm just one of these people that I'm perfectly okay with spending the next 2.5 months just waiting to see the film. It doesn't matter what... I mean, if I spend all this time trying to speculate, guess, and figure out what may or may not happen, I'll drive myself crazy when it's just so much easier to wait and just see the movie, and then everything's answered. You don't have to speculate. But then I'm also one of these people that, while you were mentioning before, sports, I will listen to sports talk radio, but one of my least favorite things about sports talk radio is when they have segments on where people are calling in saying, what if this trade was done? What if they trade this and offer this? And I'm going, if the organization has said nothing about making such trade, this is the stupidest conversation ever. Because if there's no chance it could happen, why are we talking about it? And I think that's kind of my thing. If 3PO has a crossbow, great. If he doesn't, okay. But it doesn't matter because we're going to learn whether he does or not in December, and I would just rather wait till then.
Do you see what I have to put up with?
Yeah.
Nathan, this is...
gotta be honest, I feel
he's
like...
jaded and he hates Christmas.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, although apparently he likes a surprise, just not wrapped in Christmas paper and tied off with a bow.
I like lots of stuff in Christmas paper, even if it comes early. Now, that stuff I'll take early, but that's real. That's tangible. That's in front of me. That's not saying, what if I did? Or what if it was in this paper?
Well, here's the deal. We don't like unqualified speculation, granted, and I don't think we pretend to be a news source or anything like that, although we do like to share the newsy bits, especially this guy.
Well, I think...
And normally I would have left something like that well alone, except to say that, Red Sith Troopers, all right, it's not a jump. It's not like a massive jump. Like, okay, it could have recolored a regular Stormtrooper, I suppose. Could I tell the difference from a visor? No, I couldn't. But back in March, we didn't know there were going to be Red Sith Troopers ready for JJ to ignore and make look really, really, really cool, but kill off like loads and like...
Stop it. Don't you start either.
I'm just going to let it go then. But because of that, and because, how referential the Star Wars guys have been when it comes to the expanded universe in recent years, such as Thrawn, for example, if someone said to me, like, hey, we're going to take the best bits from the Star Wars comics, like Dr. Aphra's droids, 000 and BT, and we're going to have killer robots, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm just saying it's the thing that works best for the comics for me, just like Thrawn was the best bit in all those books and the rest of them sucked. I said it. Don't hate me. I said it. It's true. All right, nice, Scott. I'm moving on, man. You're just going to dump on it again. And, I was just excited to see Anthony Daniels do something else apart from act Faye and camp in a tin can for a bit. No, see, I was like, he's getting this big action moment. And I was excited for it. And then he's like, I hate Christmas and C-3PO.
It's not a question of whether or not I want to do or do not want to see it, or whether I'm for or against seeing it. Whatever happens, I'll make a judgment. What I'm not doing is trying to guess whether something's going to happen or not. I'm not saying if it happens, it's a bad thing. If it happens, I'm sure it'll make sense and it'll be cool. It'll be whatever. But I'm not going to sit here and think and wonder if it's going to happen, especially if all that's going to happen after I've thought about that for 2.5 months is it doesn't happen. I mean, what a waste of time.
Okay, Dad.
And it might not be the movie that you wanted to see after that as well.
That's already happened once.
I totally understand. So in which case, then, we're definitely not going to mention the fact that Disney allegedly cancelled the Fan X panel this weekend with Ian McDiarmid and Hayden Christensen because there might be spoilers for the new movie. We're not talking about that either. Then I'll just, I'm just
actually,
this
I
the
think
page in the
that,
book.
but there's a difference. There's a difference there. Disney, the actual company, not there's rumor that they're going to do it. It's Disney actually did this. They actually did cancel that thing. And now, granted, you have to speculate why, but how often does that happen? See, at least there's a premise for this because the actual organization involved in the story actually did it versus speculation on whether they're going to. They did it. And I think their reasoning for doing it and the speculation around it makes perfect sense. Especially when you consider that Episode 9 is not only supposed to be the end of the trilogy, it's the end to the entire saga. And then since we know that Palpatine already has a presence in the trailer, and everything's got to connect to the other 7, or 8, I should say, it's not surprising that Hayden Christensen could show up in Episode 9 as well. That makes a lot of sense, actually, to me. That doesn't seem like nearly the pitch as trying to figure out whether something that may or may not be a fan-made poster might actually be holding something that happens in the film, because Disney wasn't involved in that. Disney was involved in this.
So, what do we think, though? Like, when Hayden Christensen, I think he got a real bad rap for it being in that prequel. I don't think he did nearly this prequel's half the bad job that people said he did. But, he's pretty much on the outs with all those Star Wars fans, that he's like derided. So do you think JJ's bringing it back because he wants to troll the fans, or do you think he's like reclaiming the continuity? What do you think?
Well, I mean, if you watched how well received he was at the last couple of celebrations, I think I don't remember him showing up at Star Wars Celebration and have tomatoes thrown at him. It looked to me like everybody was, those who wanted to see him went and saw him, and all things were good. In fact, I think, things that happened at Celebration, if anything, showed that fans can, good fans can, unite around something like that, whether they liked a film more than others or not. So I think JJ is a storyteller, so if it fits the story, he'll be in it.
I agree. And I mean, I could see it, and I'd heard about this, and I had also heard that Ian McDiarmid and Hayden Christensen had been seen together a few times recently.
Mm-hmm.
And, that sort of thickens the rumor a little bit. The fact that they're threatening legal action if the convention was to continue with the panel shows how important it is that they keep whatever it is under wraps. I think it would be cool. It would be, sort of a Force Ghost situation, I would assume. And I'm for it.
Yeah, because I think in this case, you couldn't, a couple things. I think you would be hard-pressed to come up with another reason why they would do this.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're not saying specifically why they're doing this also tells you something. Because generally, especially if you're talking about anything related to legal action or cease and desist, they're telling you why. And in this case, they're just saying, don't do it.
Yeah.
Please.
Don't do it.
Perhaps they learned their lesson from the old Tom Holland panels not so long ago, which is such a nifty segue into, I guess, the big thing that we didn't talk about in the last couple of weeks, because really there was so much really awesome stuff to talk about, but nevertheless quite important and a little sad in its own way as well, is Spidey splitting from the MCU, which has been in a couple of places. I know that it's back in the news again because the boss of Sony Pictures, Tony Vinciquerra, has doubled down with his comments that Feige is too busy to help us. He's got a full slate with these other things he's doing, and we've got great people here. We'll be fine without them. Guys, what do we think of that? The deal with that is that Disney wanted to go back to the negotiating table, and instead of taking 5% of the first dollar gross, which is 5% of all the money the movie makes on the first day of release, which is still not an insignificant sum, but it's not nearly as much as, you could get were you a co-financer on the movie. They wanted to go back to the table and do a 50-50 arrangement because they felt that they were doing all the heavy lifting and Sony was making all the money. So the story says on Variety and Deadline and places like that. And Sony aren't having it because, fueled by their success with Venom, unlikely success with Venom, that movie sucked, dudes.
Yeah.
But Tom Hardy, bankable, and Venom, fun. they feel pretty good that they can do it themselves. And Into the Spider-Verse as well obviously gave them grounds to think they could do it themselves. They've optioned a whole bunch of other stuff. I think there was a Sinister Six picture they were going to do, then they cancelled, and they're doing more Spidey shows. And I think Silver Sable and Black Cat, they're getting their own as well. So there's a whole bunch of other Spidey movies out there, and they think they've got it covered. They think they're totally cool, and they don't need the MCU elements anymore. So no Happy Hogan and none of that. None of the Stark Tech, none of that. Can't talk about it now because he's out the MCU. I think money brought them together. I think money will bring them back together. But pride comes before the fall.
Yeah.
What do you think, guys?
I mean, I really hate it when this stuff happens, just because it causes so much tension and is so divisive. But when things become this popular, and really the amount of funding behind these things and the amount of money that these things make, there's no way that this stuff isn't going to, start happening, probably even more often. I'd heard that, even with this happening, they could still, make solo Spider-Man films starring Holland. And there's still a way to, this doesn't just mean, no more Spider-Man ever, but it's change, and people don't like change. I do think there was some, greed at play here, but I feel like balance is going to come back to the force on this one because things are going to settle, and like you said, money's going to bring them back together.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up football playing in kind of a fun way in the beginning, not realizing how it would actually tie to so many things in this episode. Because as a Cowboys fan, we sat through about 2.5 months of a split between Jerry Jones and Ezekiel Elliott, who was holding out for a new contract. During the time where he did not absolutely have to be signed, Jerry Jones was saying things like this guy is saying about Kevin Feige. He was like saying, well, we're still going to try to shoot for the same goals without him. Zeke who even at one point in time said, we don't need a runner like that to win the Super Bowl. And then what happens 3 days before the season, Zeke gets pretty much what he wants, and everybody's happy and everybody's excited, and all that was for naught. And there is still quite some time before the next Spider-Man movie was even to be released, much less shot. So there's tons of time that doesn't have to be done right now. So there is tons of time for them to, when it counts, meet back at the table and see what happens. And to me, that's when I'll start worrying about it a little more.
Yeah, I feel like with the Phase 4 stuff, it's not like there's going to be any shortage of things to watch. You'd like to know that somewhere, that's what you like about the Marvel movies, with the stingers and the cameos and things like that. Much in the same way the comic books are kind of interconnected. Sadly so, with the whole, hey, see issue 649 or whatever it is, back when I was reading X-Men, the movies aren't as referential as that, but at the same time, it's nice to know they have nods to the other bits and pieces. I feel like Disney, being the juggernaut that they are, if they want something, how on earth would you compel them not to have it? Honestly, I mean, what odds another takeover? If there's a property they really, really, really want, are we saying the House of Mouse doesn't have the cash to throw down and say, yeah, okay, cool, we've seen your cards, and I think ours are a little better. We know that Sony Pictures was having trouble. Their last big movie was Skyfall. Then all of a sudden Far From Home comes along, gives them nearly $1 billion at the box office, and all of a sudden we're feeling pretty bullish about, oh, well, yeah, we're in the movie-making business. Yeah, okay, whatever, champ. Like I say, these things, I know with Feige, Kevin Feige, whenever he was, they asked him about it, he said, we got to make 5 films within the MCU with Spider-Man, 2 standalone films, and 3 with the Avengers. It was a dream that I never thought would happen. It was never meant to last forever. We knew there was a finite amount of time that we'd be able to do this, and we told the story that we wanted to tell, and I'll always be thankful for that. The Russos have said something along the similar lines, that it took heaven and earth moving together to make it happen. And Marcus and McFeely, who did the script writing for all the Avengers movies, the last few, and all that, they said the same thing. But, money talks in that business. So, like you say, it's sad to hear on the face of it, but at the same time, so much more content, and give it a year, give Venom a bomb, Venom 2. Although you hate that for that movie because Andy Serkis is directing it, and I love him.
Right.
Maybe Morbius the Vampire with Jared Leto is gonna go and just bomb terribly or something, and then maybe we come back to the table and we still. I'm gonna say.
Please don't let it be Morbius.
Well, we like the character, maybe not the actor. Let's leave it there. And maybe just maybe we see him later on in that Iron Spider suit doing his thing in I don't know 2023 or something like that.
Way to think ahead.
I'm just saying. I think the next couple of years, if you're especially if you're subscribing to Disney Plus, there's enough to watch. We've got enough to worry about in the short term.
Gosh, yes.
Yeah, like our good-natured Christmas-hating host and moderator alludes to.
We gotta stop this Christmas-hating thing just because I didn't like some goofy Christmas trailer from Disney Plus. In fact, I would argue that it's my love of Christmas that made me dislike that that trailer.
That's sounding like the origin story for a bad guy. You know that, right? I love this so much it just turned me demented and twisted, and so I launched my own podcast so I could spread the message about how much I love Christmas, but I really hate Christmas, and I must love it so much by destroying it, like Ultron, your podcast Ultron.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I didn't follow that, but yeah, you run with that.
And that's what I've got, folks. Thank you so much for indulging me. I appreciate you.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you. All right, well, get ready because, as you know, we're going to have an animated series on Disney Plus dedicated to the Marvel What If comics. But if you've never had a chance to read one of those stories and you might be interested in checking some out, this is definitely the episode for you because Matt Moore is here from Comic Book Noob, and we're going to discuss some of the stories from the What If comic books.
That's next on the Disney Plus Streamcast.
Well, we've known for a while that Disney Plus would feature an animated series dedicated to Marvel's What If comics. And then, of course, at D23, we got a chance to see one of those stories, or at least a still of one of those stories, I should say. We saw Peggy Carter as Captain Carter, because in that story, she's the one that gets infused with the super serum instead of Steve Rogers. Well, these comics have actually been around for quite some time, and talk about the series might have already piqued your interest in the comic books, and maybe if you watch the show, you'll be even more interested. So it's possible today's discussion might fuel your interest in What If comics even more, because Matt Moore is here from Comic Book Noob to talk about those comics and give us a little insight on some of the stories that have taken place in the What If comics. Hello, Matt. Welcome to the Disney Plus Streamcast.
Hey, I am glad to be here. I'm super excited about Disney Plus, so much that I joined D23 and paid for that 3-year subscription.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it was kind of hard to pass up, really.
That is going to be a great return on investment, I do believe.
Yes.
So.
Well, this is kind of a fun situation because Regina and I have the pleasure of talking with you every couple of weeks on Comic Book Noob, where we break down a comic book, or generally it's a comic book character, and telling people where they can read if they aren't that familiar with it. We are getting to do something very similar today, thanks to the combination of comics and Disney Plus, and bringing comic books to the small screen in the animated form with this What If series.
Oh, yeah. I gotta say, there's a lot about Disney Plus that has gotten me personally excited as a longtime comics reader.
Yeah.
Not just the fact that it's going to give Comic Book Noob pretty much an unending well of subject material, but when they first dropped that What If, I was like, oh yeah, this is how it's gonna roll.
I have to say, and being the person who asks all the noob questions, this won't shock anybody. It won't shock the two of you, but I had never heard of What If until they announced this series.
Oh my gosh, Scott!
So
you do not know what you are missing.
I love the. I will say I love the concept a lot, and I have to think that there are other people that are perhaps learning of this for the first time, and I think those people need to know just how much content. I mean, you don't have to wait for the animated series. There's a lot of stuff already out there that you can go out there and get. Because from what I'm looking at, this thing started back in the late 70s.
Yes, this was a Bronze Age staple that rolled all the way into the Copper Age and even made it in through the extreme 90s. Before taking a short break and then coming back in the mid-aughts, and it pops up every now and then. It is a great, because every reader, no matter what you're reading or watching, you always wonder what if, whether you're watching Star Wars and you wonder, well, what if, Luke had accepted Vader's invitation at the end of The Empire Strikes Back, or,
Mm-hmm.
What if they destroyed the rebel base on Yavin 4, and it's been like that with the comics, and I think that was probably one of the wisest moves Marvel ever made was back in '77 to launch that What If series, because it just it essentially just took classic stories and just turned them on their head, because these were all questions that readers were probably asking themselves. Given Marvel's rich IP and long history, the possibilities are unlimited. I mean, like the preview they showed at D23, where they had Captain Carter,
yes.
Peggy Carter becoming, the super soldier. That was actually it wasn't explored not so much in a what if, but I mean, it was in the most recent take on, what was it, Excalibur, I think it was? Or no, I think maybe it was Excalibur. Because one of the issues featured Sharon Carter as Captain America, where, of course, in the TV
Sharon
show, she's
Peggy.
Peggy Carter.
Okay. What's really kind of interesting is how they decided to kind of roll this thing out. It looks like that this all kind of started like in '77, where they had the Watcher basically serving as the narrator, observing, these things, these hero-related things on Earth, and then he would kind of twist it and say, but, in this other reality, this could be happening, and that's how they kind of ran with it.
And apparently that's what they're going to be doing in the show as well. I've heard that the Watcher is going to be voiced by Jeffrey Wright, the guy that plays Bernard in Westworld.
Oh, cool.
So I know, right? So
I like that.
So do I. They're going to basically do that exact same thing. And, thank you, Roy Thomas, for What If. But he basically, he wanted a way to handle major characters without having to really coordinate his stories with those of others, which, like Matt said, gives us an endless well of things. And so now to have the Watcher be voiced by Jeffrey Wright, I feel like they're just setting themselves up for, honestly, you could make a million episodes of this thing.
Definitely. And I have to correct myself. It was not Excalibur. It was the recent 12-issue series Exiles, where we had a Peggy Carter as Captain America.
Well, obviously, when you have a series like this, where there's just so many alternate stories that intrigue readers, that also leads on the internet for there to be best and worst lists.
Oh, man. Oh, this is going to be fun.
Let me just tell you a couple that I found. Now, there's Ranker, which I believe is a list that people can hit, and then they either move selections up or down based on votes. And if you look at all of the Marvel What If stories and where they rank them, the one that looks to be on the top on Ranker.com is What If Professor X and Magneto formed the X-Men together?
Oh.
I remember that issue.
The thing is, like, a lot of these things, while they don't seem plausible at all when you read the title, they always end up kind of making a lot of sense, even though some of them really go off the deep end. And I'm looking at you, what if Captain America had led an army of super soldiers during World War II?
What?
But
you're looking at that one?
Yes, that
That's
one
the
was
one?
such an emotional roller coaster for me. I was like, what the heck is going on here?
You're not looking at What If Conan the Barbarian walked the earth today?
That one was dope. What do you mean?
So what if Conan the Barbarian had walked around the Earth today? That makes me think of that's where they got the idea for the Masters of the Universe movie.
They might have.
Instead of
although in that issue's defense, I think that was probably in the late 70s when that came out, so it was a different Earth.
So of course, yeah, that's true.
Definitely a different New York City. So no, and it's funny because some of these issues, they have kind of come back around and gone full circle. I mean, the clearest example is going to be issue number 10, and it was what if Jane Foster had found the hammer of Thor. And of course, when Thor Volume 4 came out, Jane Foster she became the new Thor.
Yeah.
And of course, now we know she's also going to be in the third Thor movie.
Yep.
And they made it very abundantly clear that she was going to be wielding Mjolnir. So
well, it's interesting that Regina brought up one of her favorites being Captain America leading a group of super soldiers in World War II. On comic book resources, one of the worst they have on their list is a gamma bomb that spawned 1,000 Hulks.
I don't think I ever read that one. What?
Oh my God, you wouldn't be able to get insurance in that world.
Jeez.
There's also some some pretty intriguing notions, though. I mean, there was one of the ones being that and I think given the surprising popularity of the Venom movie, and I was not surprised, it was a fun movie. There was one issue. It was in 1992. What if number 44? What if Venom bonded with the Punisher?
Yes.
Oh my God. It was not afraid to look at iconic events in the Marvel Comics universe. I mean, one of the best stories was what if Phoenix had lived? What if she had not been killed? Because of her crimes. They're very compelling stories sometimes because it makes you think about the choices that these characters make, but the choices that these writers and editors and artists make in scoping out and mapping out their storylines. For the X-Men, for example, this was during the very long tenure that Chris Claremont was writing the book, and I think as the story goes, he wanted Phoenix to live, but the editor at the time of Marvel Comics, Jim Shooter, said, no, she's got to die. She killed 1 billion people. She has to pay the price. So the issue was so much fun, and it appeals, I think, to people, who'd gotten attached to Jean Grey and Phoenix, in a way that they really wanted some sort of redemptive arc for her. And these books kind of help do that a lot. It's also not afraid to sort of take a look at like the virtual bedrock of Marvel's foundation, especially with the Silver Age. I mean, there are issues, like what if Uncle Ben had lived and Aunt May had died?
Yeah.
Or what if Loki had found Mjolnir? What if Elektra had lived? There was a really good one.
I loved that one, actually.
It was a sharp one, wasn't it? It was
Yeah.
very entertaining, and it really made you think, and then there's others like the first appearance of Wolverine, for example, came in the Incredible Hulk number 181. At the time, I was 4, so I wasn't aware of the issue. I really wish I had been for financial reasons now. But I mean, what if Wolverine had actually killed the Hulk in that issue? That would have changed everything. Marvel would not be what it is today without the Hulk. It's a simple fact. I mean, the biggest one I think is for the Spider-Man fans out there, the death of Gwen Stacy in Amazing Spider-Man number 121 was a big darn deal. And for the longest time, Gwen Stacy, she was dead. She was like Uncle Ben. There's the common mantra in comics is there's usually 3 characters who can never come back from the dead. Thomas and Martha Wayne, obviously.
Yes.
Krypton. And Uncle Ben and or Gwen Stacy. And so, one issue of What If asked what would have happened if Gwen Stacy had lived.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's the cool thing, though, is that's what makes it such a versatile medium, even though, as wacky as it seems, is that some of them can actually handle some like pretty heavy stuff and just be some like really compelling storytelling.
They are. And it also gives them a chance to maybe look at, certain character issues or even arcs in comics and give us a different take. Going back to Spider-Man, for example, Spider-Man married Mary Jane. It was a big deal. They were married for a long time, and then one more day they were not. So we won't go there because that's a podcast unto itself.
Yeah.
But a couple of what if issues ask what if he hadn't married Mary Jane, and instead maybe what if Peter Parker had married the Black Cat instead? there's other things like, what if the Punisher became Captain America?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, in fact, Regina mentioned one of her favorites. That's actually number 13 on this ranker list. What if Captain America led an army of super soldiers in World War II? The one you just mentioned, the Punisher becoming Captain America, is number 11. At number 12 is, what if the Scarlet Witch had said no more powers instead of no more mutants?
oh, wow.
Dang.
That would have put Marvel out of business.
About, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah,
I
you
think
look
one
at
of my very favorite ones, like, of all time is what if the Watcher had killed Galactus?
Oh.
Oh my gosh. Because, basically the main Watcher that we always see, Uatu, kills Galactus when he's trying to consume the Earth. Bunch of other Watchers show up, to imprison him. Fantastic Four try to rescue him. In the end, he ends up accepting his punishment, which is really messed up because he is condemned to become the new Galactus to bring balance back to, the cosmos. And I remember that was sort of the first, like, not hilarious issue of What If that I had ever read. And I was just like, oh, we're playing those games now. Okay.
That would have been very interesting. Oh
Yeah.
my God, that would have been intriguing.
It seems
Yeah.
like the other thing that makes this kind of good for the writers, though, is it almost allows them to put a different spin on a story or go a different direction and not have to completely change everything or retcon something. They just, gives them an opportunity to write the other way they could have gone without having to disrupt the way that they actually went.
Exactly. And the fact that they're animating it really sort of unleashes the creative reins. Because, they don't necessarily have to focus on events in the comics. I mean, imagine, if you will, both of you, if, they announce an episode wherein what if Vision was not killed by Thanos at the end of Infinity War?
Mm-hmm.
Don't even play with my emotions like that, Matt.
To paraphrase the great actor of the late 1970s, what you talking about, Willis? You could even go back to, like, what if, Hawkeye ended up, shooting an arrow into Thor, when Thor was pounding around, trying to rescue Mjolnir in the first Thor movie, or what if Malekith had been successful, and conquered everybody in the second Thor movie.
It's going to be so good.
It's simple stuff like that. So that's why it really opens up. It's literally the storytelling potential is unlimited, and it can go up and down the timeline. Any character can be subject to some of this, to a what if story now.
Has there been a scenario that you both would love to see in the what if comics that could possibly make it into the series that you've always kind of thought you wish they would have done but they haven't done?
I have one. Yes, I have one, and it's good. It's an odd one because it's very specific.
Okay,
but when I was a teenager in the early 80s, there was a comic book series called Power Pack, and it was about 4 young kids, like ages 6 to 11 or 12, a family, the Power siblings, and they got powers, from an alien, and they used their powers for good, but they were kids, so they had to hide the fact that they had powers. But I always wondered what it would have been like had they gotten these powers, and then instead of using the spaceship to travel around the planet to right wrongs, et cetera, if they had gone back to the alien homeworld and conquered the planet.
Oh, that's a good one, though.
Gina, do you have one?
God, I don't have anything like that. I mean, no, I really don't, because I'm just, A, not that creative of a person, and B, so many of the what ifs have answered so many wonky questions. I really don't know what there is that's left other than, like, what if Spider-Man was more anatomically correct or something?
Didn't they cover that on Big Bang or something?
I know they did on Venture Brothers.
Well,
which is not family friendly, by the way.
Yeah.
There was a good one that came out in 2006 for What If, and these were akin. DC has this imprint called DC Elseworlds, which is essentially where they tell stories that are wildly not in continuity or in any kind of canon. It's just simply a story to be told. And Marvel did this with their What Ifs, and it was really awesome because they had one where basically positing, what if the Fantastic Four had been Russian cosmonauts?
Oh,
which brings to mind, the when you and I discussed Superman Red Sun, when Scott and I were talking about Brightburn, earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was a great story because the Fantastic Four came out during the early days of the space race. Manned spaceflight had just begun. There was this race to the moon, and can you imagine what it would have been like if they had been Soviets? That'd have been a game changer.
Yeah, it would.
I really need to read more of the newer ones. I've really only read a few of the What If Infinities.
Oh,
and
yes.
I found those to be largely forgettable. Maybe I was just in a bad mood that day. But one of them really stuck out to me, and it goes back to how iconic, the Gwen Stacy death was. But it was, what if Green Goblin had stolen the Infinity Gauntlet? And it goes, pretty much how you'd expect. He takes over the world, Dark Avengers, S.H.I.E.L.D. is called Hammer now, yada, yada, yada. But the really jacked up thing is, he's talking to his dad about, what it really means to be an Osborn. And he tells his father, what he considers to be his greatest accomplishment, which was the death of Gwen Stacy. And, he said that it was the event that he was always remembered for. And to him, it was a work of art. So basically, he uses the Infinity Gauntlet to have it replaying on a loop over and over and over so that he can watch it. And so basically forcing Peter to relive that moment again and again forever.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was just one of the most messed up things I've ever read. Oh,
it's a
it
whole
was
different
so
kind
rough.
of Groundhog Day.
Exactly. Oh, man. It was just so creepy. That's 2 for 2 that I've heard now that are pretty good. So I think I'm going to get back into some of the newer ones.
Oh, you definitely should. I mean, some of the newer ones I think were pretty good. I mean, but just for straight up, you could even go in 2018. Marvel released they did a What If sort of mini series. It was just a series of one shots. It's like Ghost Rider, New Mutants, Spider-Man, Punisher, Thor, and X-Men.
Oh, they did that. Didn't they do that for Secret Wars?
Well, they did do one. It was a little earlier. I think it was 2015. I think that one was.
Yeah.
I may be wrong. But, these were just, it was just out of the blue, and they just popped up in the solicits, and they dropped them, and they were all very entertaining. So it just, just keeps getting better and better because, it's, again, these are stories that I think that are easy to write and easy to illustrate. And, I do think there's a demand for them. People just sort of gobble them up because they really enjoy them.
Are they easy to go in and find in the comic book stores? I mean, if you go all the way down, is it a situation where you're going all the way down to the W's and you're finding What If, or are these things that since they've been around since the 70s, you want to go find those book volumes where you get multiple ones in one book?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, obviously, the most recent one from 2018, you'll have no problem getting. They have a collected edition. In some cases, some comic stores will probably still have those issues on the shelves. As for the original series from the 70s, and then Volume 2, I think, which was throughout the 80s, they tend to be in back issue bins. Some issues are probably in the dollar bin, just because there's not a whole big demand. Some are in demand. I don't know what it was about it, but there was some prescience, I think. For some reason, I had picked up the one with What If Jane Foster had become Thor.
Yeah.
Saturday morning of the eve, 8 hours later, they announced that she was going to be Thor in the movie.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'm glad I bought it. So now I don't have to overpay for it. But Marvel, I think, they have wised up. As a matter of fact, they have got collected editions of What If, classic and whatnot. So, the first volume is already out. You can get it digitally for $20. And I believe it collects issues 1 through 12 of the first volume of What If, the classic What If. And then, the complete collection volume 2 is coming out, looks like October 30th. And that's got issues 13 through 15, then 17 through 23. So yeah, it's not going to be hard to find these. And literally, if there's a character you like, you will probably be able to find a What If story about them.
Oh, guaranteed.
I'll just first start off by saying that if you enjoyed this conversation, you can find several more just like it at Comic Book Noob, which Matt and Regina and I do. It's also a podcast that you can find on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and all the places you find podcasts. or at comicbooknoob.com. But Matt also does another comic book show on the Coffee with Kenobi network.
I do. It's called Comics with Kenobi, and it literally is what it is. All we do is Jeff McGee and I focus on Star Wars comics published since 2015. In other words, those that are part of the new canon from Marvel and IDW. Although we do tend to highlight fan-created works that are online, or done in print as well, because we find those to be very invigorating stories.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else you'd like people to know that you're working on?
I'm just trying to find a really good comfy chair so that I can start streaming Disney Plus when it becomes available and never leaving it.
Oh, well, you're in good company.
Yeah.
Whether it be us or the listeners, I think we're all in that boat. So.
I tell you, 12-year-old Matt Moore is just like, whoa.
Exactly.
Right. Well, we love talking to you on Comic Book Noob, and it was great to have you here on the Disney Plus Streamcast to talk something comics related that we can expect on Disney Plus. Thanks for being here, Matt.
I appreciate very much the invitation and the offer, and thank you for having me. It's been a privilege.
Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of the Disney Plus Streamcast. We, of course, will be back in 2 weeks. Keep in mind you can stream or download any episode of the show on DisneyPlusStreamcast.com. We're also on Twitter at DisneyPlusCast. And you can find the podcast, of course, at popular hubs like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and others. And we want to thank you so much for listening to the show today, and we look forward to talking about more Disney Plus stuff in 2 weeks.
Bye, everybody.
The entertainment, adventure, and magic on Disney Plus never stops. So join us for the next episode of the Disney Plus Streamcast. You can subscribe to the show on podcast providers like iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Search, stream, or download any episode on our website. While you're there, get news updates, watch videos, follow us on social media, and check out the Streamcast Spotlight. Just go to DisneyPlusStreamcast.com. Thank you for listening.